the rights of LGBT people are kind of being reversed, or they're being dangerously threatened. And I think it's something that, again, it's where minorities have to come together for the greater good, because it is scary.
Tom Daley says life has become scary in recent years. Utter rubbish. Tom Daley is someone who has made an entire career, millions and millions of pounds, through being an openly gay man. There is absolutely no retraction of your rights, and jumping on to the trans bandwagon, the extreme trans bandwagon, to try and make a point about an overall retraction of rights for minorities is deeply dishonest. Deeply, deeply dishonest. Okay, Tom Daley. We need to talk about Tom Daley, because I don't think there is a celebrity in the United Kingdom who is more boring than Tom Daley. This is a guy who has had a privileged dream career for being a diver prancing around in his Speedos, but yet is so determined to play the victim that he has said that it makes him feel sick, that he is British, that he feels so dark about his relationship with Britain, that he now has a twisted sense of what it means to be British, and that he now feels helpless to be British. He is also a gay guy, who has jumped all over the trans issue, even though it means that his fellow female divers will be disadvantaged. And now, in a brand new interview with Sly News, Tom Daley is not only saying that he has body confidence issues, this is despite the fact he prances around in his Speedos every single day, but that he believes minorities like him in this invisible LGBTQIA plus community are now at risk because of the political movement happening in society, the anti-woke movement. Now, he has no evidence to back this up. He is literally spouting his woke nonsense as usual, and I am sick of it. I am ready to call it out, because as I say, this is not a guy who has faced a challenge in his life, and this is a man who is so determined to jump on the victimhood narrative because it makes him cash and gets him in the woke media. That is it. We'll get analysis then from Eric Kaufman, the professor of politics at the University of Buckingham, author of Taboo, How Making Race Sacred Produced a Cultural Revolution. But first, please get annoyed as you watch Tom Daley propagate this trans narrative on Sly.
Scary in some parts of the world how the rights of LGBT people are kind of being reversed, or they're being dangerously threatened. And I think it's something that, again, it's where minorities have to come together for the greater good, because it is scary. And I think it's, you may see someone else's rights going away, and I think it's important that everybody, especially minorities, come together, because it won't just be one group that gets targeted. Once one group has been targeted, it will move on to the next and the next and the next. So it's, I think the most important thing is staying visible. I think lots of people ask, what can you do to be an activist? What can you do to be an advocate? And I think it's, being truly and authentically yourself. Because as long as you're happy, your friends and family are happy, and you're not hurting anyone else, then I think being visible is a great form of activism.
Has it got worse in Trump's America?
Because I live in California and I live in Los Angeles, you don't notice the big changes as much. I think for lots of people living in the, the West Coast bubble, it is very, it was like a bit of a shock, when Trump won the election in November. But I think it's also given everybody a wake-up call that it's, again, I just always believe in leading with kindness, care and compassion, and trying to make life worth living for every single person.
Okay, leading with kindness and compassion, Tom Daley, would mean not advocating for the female divers who have spent years and years in your competitions competing against blokes who have a genetic makeup like you. That's what would be fair and compassionate. Now, Tom Daley says life has become scary in recent years. Utter rubbish. Tom Daley is someone who has made an entire career, millions and millions of pounds, through being an openly gay man. There is absolutely no retraction of your rights. And jumping on to the trans bandwagon, the extreme trans bandwagon, to try and make a point about an overall retraction of rights for minorities is deeply dishonest. Deeply, deeply dishonest. Because, let me tell you, when you discuss the fact that sometimes you've just got to jump on a bandwagon for the greater good, I ask you, Mr. Tom Daley, to think about the greater good for women who are seeing their rights retracted, who are seeing men beat them in sporting competitions, and who are seeing them be raped because men are being allowed access to their precious single-sex spaces. But this is the problem with the woke bandwagon. It only goes one way. I also had to show you, it's ludicrous, but I had to show you Tom Daley talking about his body image issues because let me tell you, this is a man who barely steps outside the house in clothes. We have seen him for years and years and years in his Speedos or dressed like that, okay? That's absolutely fine. But for Tom Daley to now try and turn on us, which you'll see him do here, and say that he has a body image problem is yet again, I believe, the height of woke victimhood. Watch this.
About just being kind to each other. Like, where has that kindness and compassion gone? Because everybody feels like they have something to say about very, small groups of people.
And you didn't seem to face that correct compassion when you were growing up, particularly you talk in the film about your coach, body image issues, being questioned if you were fat when to the outside world you'd look in great shape in that build-up to 2012.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to talk about because I know for a fact that if I say that I have body dysmorphia and I had eating disorders growing up, people are going to look at me like, oh, well, you look fine, you look great. And yes, rationally, I know that, but that's not what an eating disorder is. An eating disorder is knowing that is not being able to think about your body, what you eat, what you put into your body rationally. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily understand with eating disorders, which is why going through that, I went through it alone because I was embarrassed to be thinking those things. I didn't think anybody would believe me. I didn't think anybody would understand. And it still happens like today. If ever I talk about it, people online are always like, oh, poor you with your body. And like, it's not a fair comparison because people don't necessarily understand what it feels like because and I know rationally I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. But it doesn't stop the fact that every time I go to eat anything or every time I go into an interview, like quite often, like even the interviews that I've done this morning, people have automatically commented on my appearance and, staying in shape and like, how are you not fat yet? And so I'm constantly reminded of that. So it's definitely something that triggered, the way that I think about my relationship with food.
Did you know, I actually tweeted over the weekend, I posted on X saying, woke people, aren't they just the most effing boring people in the world? Seriously, Tom Daley has to be in that category. I'm so bored. Imagine a guy with a 6-pack or an 8-pack like that bemoaning the fact that he has body image issues and people talk to him about his body even though he shows it off every day. Ludicrous. We also had Stormzy this weekend, the rapper Stormzy, who has achieved great success through his life in the United Kingdom, not just slamming the British Empire, but the Commonwealth as well. Watch this. But first, if you're anything like me, you've spent so much time trying to find the perfect skincare treatments for your face, only to realise you've been neglecting the skin on your neck. But as I've got older, I've noticed that's a massive oversight because, of course, the neck is on display all the time, yet so many folk treat it as an afterthought in their routine. Now, so many women in our Outspoken audience will know that the skin on your neck is thinner, more delicate and less oily than facial skin. But what that means is it requires specialised care. I have to say, I was totally blown away by this brilliant product, Go Pure Tighten and Lift Neck Cream. Absolutely beautiful product, transforming the necks of women and some men. I can say some men too, me included, all across the globe. It is such a gorgeous product. And I saw a noticeable difference actually within weeks. And I know it can become a game changer for you too. Check this out as well. Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. Just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan. Use the code DAN, that's DAN, and you're all set. Now, Go Pure's proprietary firming complex designed to visibly firm and smooth the skin on your neck and chest in as little as 2 months. And in a consumer study, 100% of users said their skin actually looked more supple. 97% noticed a firmer appearance, which is obviously incredible. It's also dermatologist recommended and cruelty-free, which I know is very, very important for many other animal lovers out there. Plus, with over 1 million jars sold, I think we can say that this beauty secret is no longer really a secret anymore. So tighten, lift, and restore elasticity in your neck because your skincare routine shouldn't stop at your jawline. Let me remind you of this incredible deal for Outspoken viewers and listeners today. 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. So just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan. Use the code DAN, Dan, and you're all set. And after you buy, do us a favor. When they ask you where you heard about Go Pure, tell them it was after watching Outspoken. But now, back to the show.
British Empire is the darkest shit ever. The Commonwealth, that's the darkest shit ever. British Empire, Commonwealth. That's literally England going to countries and destroying communities, like putting there and... Like Britain has kind of like, that was back in the day. Like, that's nothing to do with us. Like, you're all here now. So yeah.
Now, Rafe Hadelman-Koo responded directly to Stormzy on that. He's from the New Culture Forum, writing, "Care to debate this, Stormzy? Without the British Empire, you would be languishing in obscurity in Ghana if you were born at all. Nothing has done more to advance the world and lift it out of poverty than colonialism and capitalism. This is not to deny the bad aspects of the British Empire, but no colonial power was more benign or brought more benefits to its former colonies than Britain. From Canada to Australia, South Africa to the Caribbean, Singapore to Israel, former British colonies are usually the most successful, stable, democratic, and prosperous in their region of the world. Britain gave them the English language, common law, and the rule of law. Westminster model of parliament, civil service, police, universities, hospitals, infrastructure, an end to cyclical famines, the elimination of diseases, increasing life expectancy, etc., etc. And Britain fought to stamp out barbaric cultural practices, human sacrifice, headhunting, female genital mutilation, slavery, to name but a few. So yes, the British Empire had some dark episodes, but the benefits brought to Britain's former colonies far outweigh the harm. Anyone who exaggerates and mentions only the negatives of the British Empire whilst completely ignoring the positives is either ignorant or disingenuous and deceitful. Either way, clips like this promote a dangerous and destructive anti-British agenda." So Eric Kaufman, you're obviously a director of a new centre for non-woke social research. And I want to speak about your conference in just one moment. But first, can you explain at all why celebrities like Tom Daley and Stormzy have this obsession with what I describe as woke victimhood? Like, why do these very, very successful people, who I would argue have had massive success, in Stormzy's case, by being in the United Kingdom, in Tom Daley's case, by our massively forward-thinking ways, where actually he became more of a star once he came out as gay rather than being shunned. Why are they so determined as multi-millionaires to constantly try and turn themselves into victims? What is it with woke victimhood?
Well, I mean, just again, to return to that definition of woke, making sacred historically marginalized race, gender, sexual identity groups. We've just seen an example from the sexual identity side, and then we've seen one from the race side, right? That means because this is the center of our public religion, if you virtue signal to those identities, then you gain esteem. Those identities are also the basis of taboos which you dare not transgress. In this case, we're seeing the virtue signaling. And that gives you a surge of moral righteousness and cultural capital. That's why they're doing this, right? Now, as you mentioned, in the case in the first case, we have a clear example of where there's actually no evidence that you've got a rise in anti-gay hate crime in Britain.
Quite the
So
opposite.
yeah,
Quite the opposite.
this this is completely manufactured out of thin air. It's kind of alarmism. There's been a strategy that oh yeah, we're only one step away to women being back in the kitchen and gays in the closet and separate water fountains for blacks. This is kind of or 1933 Germany. These are the sort of techniques that are used, the catastrophizing techniques to manufacture consent and get everybody in line. And whenever you sort of cite, "Ooh, there's danger around the corner where it's going to be back to gays in the closet," you get approval. It's utterly ridiculous, evidence-free garbage. Now, if you take the Stormzy stuff again, the history of humanity up until 5 minutes ago was basically about slavery, colonization, and genocide of one tribe against another. Britain was amongst the first to bring that to an end. When we talk about anti-slavery, when we talk about international relations, international law, they get no credit for that. Instead, because they were kind of the last, one of the last in this sort of musical chairs game, they get blamed for everything. I mean, what this leads to is astounding illiteracy. In the U.S., most, for example, most people think that white Americans invented slavery, or most Black Americans would say white Americans invented slavery, which is ridiculous if you've ever read the Bible. In the U.S., you find 7 out of 10 young people think the native peoples lived in peace and harmony before the Europeans arrived. Obviously, if you actually look at the historical record, the fossil record, those societies were up to 1,000 times more violent. Steven Pinker, who's going to be at my conference, wrote a book called Better Angels of Our Nature, goes through all the evidence. Essentially, these societies were incomparably more violent and barbaric and slaveholding than ours are. And yet, who gets tagged with this stuff? It's the British Empire or the Americans or whatever. I mean, it's just historical illiteracy.
Now, so you're now a director of a new centre for non-woke social research. Your first conference is on heterodox social science, and your goal is to establish a new intellectual movement which you say will correct the deep progressive biases of academia by doing research that has been prohibited, which skews knowledge. Now, that's going to shock a lot of people who are outside of the world of academia, Eric, that what you're essentially saying is that academia, including studies, which then are used to make political decisions all around the world, are effectively woke.
Absolutely. The sad reality is, research from one perspective gets amplified, and any research that goes against that main perspective, if it's in a controversial area, is essentially kept out, or it's very hard to get published. So, for example, if you were to say, well, one of the reasons behind the black-white wealth gap is because you have fewer intact families, a much lower rate of intact families amongst Black Americans, only 30% versus, maybe it's 60 or 70 amongst whites. You would not be able to get that research published, or it would be extremely difficult, and people wouldn't learn that in textbooks. They wouldn't learn that biology is very important as a predictor of human behavior. Heritability, for example, of genetics is very important in explaining human behavior, life outcomes, a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't learn. Many questions would never be asked or would simply be sidelined. And so we're not getting a proper understanding of social science. We're getting a skewed and warped. It's a bit like a ski hill. You're allowed to ski within the bounds. You're not allowed to go off piste. And so your whole understanding of that ski hill is completely skewed. So another example is even the study of woke ideology. Why aren't universities studying something that has been enormously in the news? There's a lot of attention. There have been all these books that have poured out on this, many from non-academics. But that's not a discipline because it's too uncomfortable. It cuts too close to the beliefs of many academics who are lean about, in the social sciences, about roughly 10-1 left to right. That's roughly what it is. Or if you're in Harvard, it's like 90. If you look at political donations in the Ivy League, 96% Democrat, 4% Republican. So because you've got a monoculture there, no one wants to study uncomfortable topics. We need to create and fill in the blanks of a social science, of academia, and that informs politics and it informs policy. For who thought that defunding the police might be a good idea? I mean, yes.
Well, yeah, exactly. Now, you've got some incredible speakers. I mean, Gad Saad, love Gad Saad. He's so brilliant. He's been on Outspoken before. And people can actually come to the conference, is that right? So when is it and how can people get their tickets? Tell us everything we need to know.
Yeah. The conference itself is in Buckingham. That's sort of just an invited conference, but we have a London event with Gad Saad, the fantastic Gad Saad and Baja and Garsargo and Matt Goodwin. That's taking place in London at the Emmanuel Centre on Wednesday the 4th. So that's certainly, I encourage people to get tickets to come along. It's going to be a great event.
So this Wednesday.
This Wednesday, yeah.
And where can people buy tickets?
And if you go to, if you just Google Gad Saad Eventbrite London, I think, yeah, you should be able to find that. I don't know if you have show notes, but certainly you can find it. Eventbrite is just event, EVENTBRITE.
Oh, yes. Look, I've just found it here. So,
Yeah.
so look at this. Is woke dead? There we go. And
Fantastic.
tickets are available. So, yep, I literally just Googled Gad Saad Eventbrite event, and there we go. Brilliant stuff. Well, look, it's been so brilliant to have you on Outspoken today. Good luck for the event and the conference, and thank you so much for all the work that you do, Eric. It's absolutely incredible. You're a true freedom fighter in academia, which, my God, we need.
Thanks, and you too, by the way.
Thank you so much, Eric. Hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.